Hello, welcome to Axiom Curb on the Flux News with me, PJ, and Blackhole Bridger on the panel. Today's date's 4th of April 2015, and I've got a few articles, a bit of breaking news, and a bit of coverage over in Yemen. But before we start on that, just like to say hello to Blackhole there. Hello, Blackhole.
Yeah, good evening, PJ.
You alright, Blackhole?
All right, thanks. Good evening. Yeah, can you hear me?
I can do, yeah, that's great, perfect. I believe you're covering a bit on the EU, the general election, NHS, is that right?
Yeah, it's all intermingled.
Oh, lovely, so do stick about for Blackhole's part just after mine. So we're going to start now with the first article. A helicopter crash kills 6 Malaysian government officials. This is breaking news here. I've got a video which I will play after. I just wanted to read a bit of this just to introduce you to it. A helicopter crashed outside Kuala Lumpur on Saturday, killing all on board, including a Malaysian lawmaker who was a former ambassador to the United States. The former Minister of Science of Malaysia, Jamaluddin Jaras, was one of the 6 people who died in the crash. So I'm going to start this video now.
Rompin MP Tan Sri Jamaluddin Jajis and 5 others were killed when the helicopter they were in crashed in Semenyih Kajang on Saturday. Home Minister Datuk Sri Dr. Ahmad Zahid Hamidi confirmed that Jamaluddin was on board the helicopter which was en route from Kuantan to Subang. Police confirmed that all 6 died in the crash. Eyewitnesses said the helicopter exploded in mid-air at about 5 in the evening. It crashed into a rubber plantation and burst into flames.
It's a short video there, but a bit of information. So this privately owned chopper was en route from Kuantan to Subang when it crashed. The victims were said to be returning from the wedding reception of the Prime Minister's daughter in Pahang earlier today. The Malay Mail Online report. Rompin MP Tan Sri Jamaluddin Jaris was one among the 6 people involved in a deadly helicopter crash in Semenyih this evening, according to the Kuala Lumpur Fire and Rescue Department. So according to the department's Chief Operating Officer, Samsul Marif Sambane, others also on board included businessman Datuk Robert Tan, Datuk Azlin Elias, the Prime Minister's Private Chief Secretary, Cliff Fournier, the pilot and owner of Chempaka Aviation, Edana Bezivia, and bodyguard Razakan Saran. According to the information provided by the Royal Malaysian Air Force, the helicopter was en route from Kuantan to Sungai Besar when it crashed. All 6 bodies were recovered by 9:30 p.m. with no survivors from the flight. No other deaths or casualties were reported. According to preliminary information received, the helicopter crashed and burst into flames at about 4:55 p.m. A Civil Defence Department spokesman was quoted as saying by national news agency BURNHAM. An eyewitness claimed to see the helicopter explode in flames into flames mid-air. It exploded completely. Disintegrated in mid-air, it didn't crash. The rotor and tail section were flung all over the place. Rosalind Harun, a 54-year-old security guard, was on duty near the scene, told BURNHAM. So it sounds like a pretty bad incident here with the helicopter and some high-ranking people on board, or influential, important people on board that. So this is breaking 2 hours ago on your newswire. That's all we've got on that. What do you think of that one, Blackhole? What's your first thoughts on that?
My first thoughts on it is it seems to be rather weird that it's Malaysia again. Is it somehow connected, I wonder, with the International Criminal Court being held there just a couple of years ago?
Oh, that's an interesting thought. Not really thought of that one. What made you think of that?
Well, it just seems rather strange, just such incidents happening there after the International Criminal Courts found Tony Blair and George Bush guilty of war crimes.
It's interesting. Right, okay, well, move on to Fidel Castro then, because he appears in public for the first time in 14 months. You can see that image there, hopefully, Blackhole of Fidel.
I've got no images up from you from this end.
Have you not?
No.
Alright. Should be on your Hangout tab there if you can find it.
Me Hangout tab isn't there. Not like normal.
Oh, it'll be at the bottom somewhere there. Let me try and reset it just in case it is on a problem on my side.
Ah, yes, but I've got no picture up. I've now got the Hangout.
That's good. You should see it now, Paul. It's coming up.
Right.
Just restarting it just in case it's doing the same for the viewers there.
Technology, isn't it wonderful?
Oh, it's too many clicks. It's click mania, isn't it? Right. Sorry about that, guys. We will carry on.
Yes, I have a picture up now. Thank you.
Good. So, former Cuban President Fidel Castro, on the left here, greeted a member of the Venezuelan delegation, the second flight Solidarity Bolivar Marte, who are in Cuba taking part in social and political activities in Havana on March the 30th, 2015. So just under a week ago there. Former Cuban President Fidel Castro has made his first public appearance for more than a year. The 88-year-old met a Venezuelan delegation which had travelled to the island. As the pictures show, Castro made the appearance on March 30th, however, it was only reported by Cuban state media on Saturday. It was the first time that the former Cuban president has been officially seen in public in 14 months. The revolutionary icon was wearing a blue and white tracksuit and a black cap, as well as a hearing aid. Pictures taken of the former leader show him shaking the hands of supporters through the window of the vehicle he was travelling in. He also met 33 Venezuelans at a school who had been visiting Cuba on a solidarity mission. Castro spent around 90 minutes talking to the delegation in the capital, Havana. Gama, the official Cuban newspaper, said Castro greeted one by one and without any difficulties Venezuelans who were left impressed by Castro's lucidity and his attention to the details of what was happening in Venezuela. Another one there. The report also added that Fidel is full of vitality, while Castro discussed multiple details about life in Venezuela, especially now that this great nation has become the bullseye for imperial greed, according to Reuters. This was in reference to US sanctions imposed on the South American nation, which Washington deems to be a security threat. Castro made his last public appearance on January the 8th, 2014, when he participated in the gallery opening for a long-time friend, Cuban artist Alexis Leva, also in the capital. In December, his brother Raul, who took over from Fidel in 2006, agreed to restore diplomatic relations with the US, the Caribbean nation's historic enemy. In January, Fidel spoke publicly for the first time about the rapprochement with Washington, saying, "I don't trust the policy of the United States, but this does not mean I reject a Pacific solution to the conflicts." So latest images are all there. The next one is the airstrikes over in Yemen. There's a family of 9 have been killed. Image here of people as they dig graves for the victims of an airstrike in Okash village near Sana'a, April the 4th, 2015. A family of 9 has been killed in an airstrike on a Yemeni village near Sana'a, residents report. 5 others have been wounded, while several others remain trapped under rubble, according to the Yemeni media. The strike, which on Friday evening hit the Okash village, just a few miles away from a military base outside the capital, killed 2 men, a woman, and 6 children, Reuters reported, citing residents. The state news agency Sabah posted a picture on its website showing 3 children lying next to each other with pieces of paper with the date April the 3rd, 2015 written on them. However, the authenticity of photo has not yet been verified. The Saudi-led military coalition began launching airstrikes against Yemen's Houthi rebels last week. The operation intends to bring ousted President Abdurabu Mansur Hadi back into power and prevent the Houthi militants and backers of the Hadi's predecessors, Ali Abdullah Saleh, from gaining full control of the country. In Aden, a southern port city which has seen the fiercest clashes in the country, medics say that fighting has left at least 185 people dead and more than 1,200 wounded since the violence sharply escalated last week. Aden had been one of the loyalists' few remaining footholds in the country, where Hadi had been holding up after being forced out of the capital by the Houthis in February. Hadi fled the country for Riyadh last week. There's an image there. People standing on the rubble of houses destroyed by an airstrike in the village. So the head of Aden's health department, Al-Qadar Lassour, told AFP that 3/4 of the casualties were civilians, adding that the actual death toll is likely much higher, as the Houthis or their allies do not take their casualties to public hospitals. It has also called for international aid organisations and Arab states to provide emergency medical supplies to Aden's hospitals. Medicine stocks are exhausted and hospitals can no longer cope with the increasing number of victims, he said. International Committee of the Red Cross representative Sitara Jabin told RT that the organisation is making breakthroughs in negotiations for a 24-hour in order to get aid into the country. We are now waiting for a formal green light. We hope that by tomorrow we will be able to send our supplies and personnel to Yemen, she said Saturday. She emphasised that the organisation was talking to all the parties in the conflict. Earlier, the ICRC released a statement calling for an immediate 24-hour humanitarian pause in hostilities. All air, land and sea routes must be opened without delay for at least 24 hours to enable help to reach people cut off after more than a week of intense airstrikes and fierce ground fighting nationwide. 3 shipments of aid, the medical staff from the ICRC had been blocked for several days because of both the Saudi-led aerial bombardment as well as the intense clashes on the ground between Yemen's rivaling factions. Several boats and planes containing over 48 tons of medical supplies are awaiting security clearance to leave for Yemen. A 4-person surgical team is also on standby in Djibouti, waiting to be dispatched to Aden by boat. So there you go. Also links into my next article. Russia submits draft resolutions to the UNSC on Yemen crisis amid Saudi-led airstrikes. As the fighting in Yemen intensifies, Russia has submitted a draft resolution to the UN Security Council that calls for a humanitarian pause to the Saudi-led coalition airstrikes in an effort to quell the violence that is impacting civilians. Russia submitted the draft resolution during a closed emergency UNSC meeting that finished late on Saturday. Russia insists it is necessary for the international community to discuss the establishment of regular and mandatory humanitarian pauses. In the ongoing coalition, airstrikes on Yemen, Russian UN's mission spokesman Alexei Zaitsev told Sputnik. A coalition of Arab states led by Saudi Arabia has been engaging with the militias from the air for over a week now, after the Yemeni president was forced to flee the country and asked for an international intervention to reinstate his rule. Moscow is calling for a diplomatic solution to the conflict, emphasizing that foreign military intervention would only lead to more civilian deaths. On Friday, Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov met with newly appointed Saudi ambassador, conveying the necessity of ceasefire to create favourable conditions for a peaceful national dialogue. Russia has already taken steps to evacuate all of its personnel from its Yemeni consulate, which was damaged in the conflict. It has also taken an active role evacuating Russian nationals and other civilians from the country. So there's quite a lot into this article here. I'm just going to pick through parts. The airstrike also reportedly destroyed the military equipment and missiles. At the same time, Saudi-led coalition airdropped weapons to President Hadi's supporters in Aden, coalition spokesman General Ahmed Aziri said. "We should not be in a rush," he said, as the campaign entered its 9th day. "The campaign is achieving its goals, and you can see that every day." On Thursday, the Saudi Arabia claimed that there were no formal troops on the ground in Yemen. In Yemen, however, the issue of using ground troops is always something that is on the table. Saudi Ambassador Adel Al-Jubeir said at the event in Washington, "The UN estimates that over 500 people, many civilians, have been killed in Yemen over the past 2 weeks. Though the Allied Air Force target most military facilities, weapon depots and infrastructure, their strikes still befell on civilians. Tens of thousands have fled the country after the outbreak of violence." So let's go into 21st Century Wire and let's see what's being said here. It says, "Did US CENTCOM feed Saudis target info to bomb Russian consulate in Yemen?" This is also an article from today. "Washington war planners are up to their old tricks again, this time in Yemen." Saudi Arabia's gallant airstrikes against mostly civilian infrastructure targets, not rebels as advertised, in brackets there, have also struck the Russian Consulate General in the southwestern Yemeni city of Aden. When Saudi Arabia launched its war against Yemen on the week of March 23rd, the US proudly announced that their hands were clean because they were only providing satellite information, military intelligence which included targeting information, to the Saudi Air Force. It's fairly obvious then that the target information for the Russian embassy was fed to the Saudis by the US CENTCOM. Not surprisingly, just as the Saudis hit and mostly destroyed the Russian consulate yesterday, the US then issued a swift U-turn on that previous statement, subtly claiming we're not providing them with targeting information. So it seems that the Saudis were duped by Washington. No surprise there, as Riyadh is still fairly new to this US proxy Air Force arrangement. Even when Washington is caught red-handed, they will still attempt to rewrite their previous statements to cover up their obvious crimes. More from the global research. During US-led NATO's rape of Yugoslavia, China's Belgrade embassy was willfully bombed. So it's claiming by mistake didn't wash. The Pentagon included China's embassy on its target list. Yemen is Obama's war. Saudis and other regional states involved are US proxies. Months of planning preceded air and naval strikes. Yemeni targets were carefully chosen. Among them, Russia's Aden's consulate, Maybe it's Sana embassy it's next. Bombing its Aden consulate is part of Washington's increasing confrontation with Moscow, a reckless agenda, including vicious propaganda, US-Ukraine policy, its growing Eastern European military footprint, and saber-rattling exercises close to Russia's borders. On April the 2nd, Sputnik News reported Saudi airstrikes damaged Russia's Aden consulate. A source cited said, "There is not a single window left. All Russian citizens may be evacuated from the city." Since conflict began last week, the other countries and UN authorities evacuated their citizens and staff from Yemen. Remaining risks, death or injury, Sputnik reported Saudi authorities denied a Russian plane sent to evacuate its nationals from Yemen permission to land in Sana'a. It was forced to divert to Cairo. It's awaiting clearance to complete its mission. Lebanon's Mayadeen news channel earlier reported Russia got permission to evacuate its citizens. No official confirmation followed. Saudi's International Airport Director, Khalid al-Shayef, said the aircraft's crew made contact with Saudi-led forces while flying over the Red Sea. They refused to allow the landing and the plane had to fly to Cairo. TASS reported Russia's aircraft was denied landing permission despite preliminary reached agreement. According to Russia's Daily Kommersant, evacuation was delayed until Thursday. A chartered aircraft accompanied by two others is expected to arrive in Sana'a later today, unless again blocked. Plans are to evacuate Russian nationals and citizens of the Commonwealth of Independent States. Saudi-led airstrikes continue. UNICEF said over 5 dozen Yemeni children were killed so far, many others injured. Civilian neighborhoods, hospitals, schools and basic infrastructure are being deliberately targeted. UNICEF reported heavy damage to healthcare and education facilities. Terror bombing leaves children traumatized. An increasing humanitarian crisis includes food insecurity, severe malnutrition, growing displacement and lack of medicines, supplies and equipment to treat the injured. UNICEF Yemen representative Julian Harnias said, "Children are in a desperate need of protection." Since March the 25th, Saudi-led terror bombing began. Scores of civilians were killed, hundreds injured. UN Commissioner for Human Rights Zeid Ra'ad Al Hussein expressed alarm over a growing humanitarian crisis, saying, "The situation in Yemen is extremely alarming. With dozens of civilians killed over the past 4 days, the country seems to be on the verge of total collapse." ICRC spokeswoman Sitara Jabin said Saudi-led forces are hampering delivery of vital medical supplies. "The thing is that we have to restock our supplies in Yemen with more supplies," she said. "If we do not manage to bring these supplies, we would not be able to cope with the situation and the wounded would be without treatment. We have been negotiating, but we still haven't gotten permission to deliver aid." Overnight Wednesday, Saudi-led terror bombing targeted Adida dairy juicing facility. Reports indicate at least 37 killed and 80 injured. Preparations for a Saudi-Egyptian-led ground invasion remain underway, with full US support and encouragement. Mass slaughter may follow. Millions of Yemenis are at risk. US regional policy is ravaging and destroying another country. A previous article quoted the Yemeni nationals' call for help by email to this writer. It was deeply moving. So all that with the latest information.
Well, I find it particularly vicious when the poor innocent civilians are having to take the brunt of Washington's aggression.
Well, there you go. Well, they're just saying they're not involved. They're just, they were passing information.
Would say that, but that's where all the planning's coming from.
Yeah, which leaves me with this one before I hand over to you, Blackhole.
I'm sorry, I thought you'd finished.
I've finished in a minute. This is the Dirty Wars. I don't know if you've seen this, Blackhole, but for those viewers that are watching this, it's gripping, compelling, and totally convincing. A journalist to cover up a secret army. If you can get a watch of this, do recommend it. But apart from that, that's all I've got, Blackhole, so I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, good articles, PJ, thank you.
No worries.
Right, well, the title and the subtitles of my articles today is one or the other is no choice whatsoever. The map of influence, we are being steered. Direct democracy is the only choice. So I begin with a video, with a YouTube of David Cameron in 2009, where he promised an EU referendum. But before I start it, may I add, he said could, not would or should. He said could. But have a listen, and it's here we go.
In 2005, all of the major political parties promised a referendum on the European Constitution. Why does this matter? Why do we need a referendum, and why do we need one now? First, why this matters. The European Constitution, now called the Lisbon Treaty, includes a massive transfer of powers from the nation states of Europe to Brussels. It ends our veto, our right to say no, in about 60 areas. It sets up a permanent president of the European Union, a foreign minister, a diplomatic service. It gives the European Union the right to sign treaties and to pass new treaties, new constitutions, without asking us again, the people of Europe. Why do we need a referendum? Well, I think when our parliament is giving up powers, is passing powers to someone else, they should ask us first, the people, in a referendum. So you can use June the 4th, this Thursday, the European elections, to demand a referendum from Gordon Brown. The referendum he promised, along with everyone else, back in 2005. The best way to get that referendum is to vote Conservative. Don't you think all of us should have a say in the referendum that we were promised? In 2005,
now this video particularly annoys me of David Cameron being such a hypocrite, as he's emphasised in the EU not asking the people. Yeah, and now he keeps on about we're going to have a referendum and in out, yes, no, shake it all about. And he has no intentions of asking the people or following the people's wishes. So my next article is Backroom Deals. This is a top political article, and it's Backroom Deal between Tories and UKIP could kill the National Health Service. Considering the facts of the coalition deal with the Liberal Democrats, perhaps we should be asking if a deal has already been struck between the Conservative Party and UKIP. For all those outside of the UK, that's the United Kingdom Independence Party. It would explain why David Cameron's performance in yesterday's leader debate was so lacklustre. Maybe he doesn't think he needs to sell himself. A deal with UKIP makes perfect sense to those of us who have watched politics carefully over the last few years. The ease with which Douglas Carswell and Mark Reckless transferred from one party to the other, keeping their parliamentary seats in the process, shows how interchangeable the two parties really are. Labour's Andy Burnham, who's the Shadow Secretary of Health, by the way, has written to Cameron, calling on him to come clean about any such plans. He wrote, "During the last night's debate, you proved that you cannot defend your record, which is why you cannot win a majority. It is now clear that you are preparing to do a deal with the United Kingdom's Independence Party. As someone who follows rather than leads their party, you will know that a deal with UKIP is what the Tory party wants. A growing number of your MPs and up to half of Conservative activists are arguing for it. Local Tory parties are already striking deals with the United Kingdom's Independence Party up and down the country. And of course, 2 of your MPs have already crossed the floor. We know the terms of such a deal. Nigel Farage has said he would work with you in exchange for a full and fair referendum to be held in 2015. I believe he's referring to the in-out referendum, Shake It All About referendum. You have said you would be delighted to offer this, but the real terms of the deal see the end of the National Health Service as we know it. The Tories are preparing to do a deal with the United Kingdom's Independence Party. Monsieur Cameron and Monsieur Farage. Your Health and Social Care Act has increased National Health Service privatisation, and UKIP want to go even further. Private providers have won 1/3 of the National Health Service's contracts to provide clinical services since your reforms. Nigel Farage has said he supports an insurance-based system of healthcare, while his deputy has warned that the very existence of the National Health Service stifles competition. UKIP's ex-Tory MP, Douglas Carswell, has called for an open market in healthcare contracts. This shared agenda will be the real basis for your decision to work together. Your deal with the United Kingdom's Independence Party is a poisonous proposition that would deny working people the care they rely on from a service they cherish. Of course, it may well be that Cameron's Tories and Farage's Kippers will be unable to muster up the parliamentary majority together, even in combination with the Liberal Democrats. If that party survives electoral annihilation, only your vote can decide that. What will you do? Will you let these slick operators kill the National Health Service on the sly? This finalised on the March the 16th of 2010, nearly 2 months before that year's general election. Yep, so we'll go on to the next article, which will take a bit more into depth of what's going on. So basically they're swinging backwards and forwards to what we have, whether we stay in the EU and have no National Health Service, or have a National Health Service and don't get out of the EU. Now this article comes from the Labour press. That's the Labour Party of the United Kingdom, or should I say England. There's a letter from Andy Burnham, who is the Shadow Health Secretary, calling on Cameron to come clean over plans to strike deal with United Kingdom's Independence Party. Dear Prime Minister, I'm writing to urge you to come clean over your plans to strike a deal with the United Kingdom's Independence Party. During last night's debate, you proved that you cannot defend your record, which is why you cannot win a majority. It is now clear that you are preparing to do a deal with the United Kingdom's Independence Party. Repeatedly pressed, your Chancellor, George Osborne, and Chief Whip, Michael Gove, last night failed to rule out doing a deal with United Kingdom's Independent Party. When asked again this morning, Michael Gove only said "Nein danke." You have yourself frequently ducked this question. As someone who follows rather than leads their party, you will know that a deal with the United Kingdom Independence Party is what the Tory party wants. A growing number of your MPs, and up to half of the Conservative activists, are arguing for it. Local Tory parties are already striking deals with UKIP up and down the country. And of course, 2 of your MPs have already crossed the floor.
Can I just say that the 9 dank is no thank you in
Yes, yes, I meant to actually say that. Thank you for reminding me. We know the terms of such a deal. Nigel Farage has said he would work with you in exchange for a full and fair referendum to be held in 2015. You have said you would be delighted to offer this, but the real terms of the deal would see the end of the National Health Service as we know it. Your Health and Social Care Act has increased the National Health Service privatisation, and UKIP want to go even further. Private providers, sorry, bear with me. Private providers have won a third of the National Health Service contracts to provide clinical services since your reforms. Nigel Farage has said he supports an insurance-based system of healthcare, while his deputy has warned that the very existence of the National Health Service stifles competition. UKIP's ex-Tory MP Douglas Carswell has called for an open market in healthcare contracts. This shared agenda will be the real basis for your decision to work together. Your deal with the United Kingdom Independence Party is a poisonous proposition that would deny working people the care they rely on from a service they cherished and they paid for. This is now essential that you come clean about your plans. Best wishes, Andy Burnham. So we've got the shadow secretary, health secretary, pulling them down over the so-called deal which have been held behind closed doors. The next article comes from another angry voice, and it's 12 things you should know about the Tories and the NHS as the National Health Service for sale. In this article, I'm going to explain 12 things that you should know about the Tories and the National Health Service. I've also uploaded a version of this article to BuzzFeed, which contains more pictures but fewer words. You can see that here. So if you want to click on that at a later date. David Cameron lied about the NHS, that's the National Health Service. Before the 2010 general election, David Cameron promised no more top-down reorganisations of the National Health Service. Then within months of coming into power, his Health Secretary Andrew Lansley launched the biggest top-down reorganisation in the history of the National Health Service, the National Health and Social Care Act. Cameron also made the pre-election promise that the Tories would cut the deficit, not the National Health Service. And the deficit happens to be double to what it is when they came in power, before launching 20 billion worth of National Health Service cuts.
So wait a minute. So it's not the debt's doubled, yeah? The deficit is not the debt.
No, the deficit is not the debt. The deficit is the interest that's having to be paid on the debt. So if the debt is doubled, the deficit has gone up in comparison to the debt.
It's doubled in length of time of paying it off, yeah? You could say that'd be safe to say that if the debt's doubled.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So just to make, because a lot of people get confused with deficit and debt. And
well, actually, George Osborne was confused. Their so-called Chancellor, he didn't know the difference between the debt and the deficit when he was quizzled on it. I forget what programme it was now. But even he didn't know the difference, so I can understand the normal viewer not knowing the difference. In 2011, the former Tory leadership candidate Michael Portillo admitted that David Cameron and the Tories had lied to the public about their intentions towards the National Health Service before the 2010 general election. They did not believe they could win an election if they told you what they were going to do, because people are so wedded to the National Health Service. Of course they are. They pay for it, and their parents pay for it, and their grandparents paid for it. Portillo was right. The privatisation of the National Health Service is a very unpopular idea. According to the 2013 YouGov poll, 84% of the public would prefer to see the National Health Service run as a non-for-profit public service, while just 7% favour privatisation, and that's from a source. Even though they were facing a Labour Party led by an incredibly unpopular and blunder-prone leader in Gordon Brown. And in the wake of the biggest economic meltdown in generations, the Tories were still incapable of even winning a majority government. Had they admitted their intentions to carve up the National Health Service and hand out the pieces to their corporate mates, this would surely have cost them hundreds of thousands of votes and potentially left Labour to form a coalition government with the Liberal Democrats. Now, from the graph here, the blue is showing you the people that believe it should be run by the public sector, and the green it should be run by the private sector. As you can see, people that wanted the private sector to it is vastly lower than the people that want it to remain in the public sector. Loads of Tory politicians have vested interest in the privatisation of the National Health Service. Dozens and dozens of the Tory MPs and Lords who voted in favour of the privatisation of the National Health Service have clear vested financial interests in private health corporations. Here is a detailed list of some of the politicians. This will be put up on the Axiom Curbs website if you wish to go and view it later. Who looks set to benefit from the National Health Service privatisation bill? They voted for. One of the most notable examples is Lacey Lord Coe, who barely ever turns up to vote in the House of Lords. He voted in just 7.9% of debates between the year 2000 and 2013. However, when the opportunity to benefit his numerous private health interests, Plural Health, AMT, Cybex, Chime Communications, presented itself, he was amongst many Tory lords with financial interest in the private health sector to make rare appearances in the House of Lords and vote in favour of the Greater National Health Service privatisation. The Tories have been carving up the National Health Service and giving away the pieces to their donors, Circle Health, which is 29.2% owned by a hedge fund run by major Tory party donor Paul Ruddock, who has been handed over £1.3 billion in National Health Service contracts. Other Tory party donors with major investments in Circle Health include Martin Arabic, Crispin Odey and Michael Platt. Care UK has received over 100 million in National Health Service contracts. Their chairman is John Nash, who has made £247,250 worth of donations to the Tory party, aside from his company picking up huge National Health Service contracts as a result of Tory party legislation. He has also been handed a seat in the unelected House of the Lords. The National Health Service is one of the best health services in the world. A recent study by the Washington-based Commonwealth Fund has shown that the National Health Service is one of the best, cheapest and most efficient health services in the world, whilst the private sector-dominated US health system is the worst, most expensive and least efficient of the 11 different healthcare systems that they looked at. The National Health Service reforms introduced by the Tory party are designed to make the National Health Service much more like the United States system by bringing in even more private health corporations to take over the National Health Services. The Tory mantra about bringing in the private sector to make the National Health Service more efficient. It's just a smokescreen. The real reason for bringing in the private sector is to soak as much profit out of the system as possible, with no regards for the quality or efficiency of the service.
Yeah, it's just complete outsourcing, asset stripping, innit? That's all it is.
Absolutely, absolutely. And all the promises that were given before this term's elections was just all smoke and mirrors. Absolute diabolical tribe. Jeremy Hunt in 2009, the Tory MP, Jeremy Hunt, co-authored a book which called for the National Health Service to be dismantled and called it no longer relevant. In 2012, David Cameron appointed Jeremy Hunt as Health Secretary, meaning that the man who is now responsible for the National Health Service is a man who has called it to be completely abolished. The fact that David Cameron would appoint a Health Secretary who is on record saying that the National Health Service should be abolished illustrates exactly how gullible he imagined the general public to be when he made the pre-elections promise that the National Health Service will be safe in my hands. No confidence. Medical professionals have voted time and time again against the Tory National Health Service reforms. The British Medical Association have also passed motions of no confidence against the current Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt and his predecessor Andrew Lansley. Virtually the entire medical profession is opposed to the Tories and their plot to privatise the National Health Service. It is quite impossible to make the National Health Service more efficient when the people in charge of it are conducting an ideological war against the people who actually run the service. What is needed is people in charge who want to work with the doctors and other medical professionals rather than against them. The myth of private sector efficiency is the fact that the private sector dominated US health system is hugely expensive and inefficient, whilst the public sector dominated National Health Service is rated as one of the most efficient in the world, should be enough to convince most people that it's a complete myth that the private sector is somehow inherently more efficient than the public sector. When it comes to healthcare provision, it is quite easy to understand why greater private sector involvement causes inefficiencies in the system. If the National Health Service signs a 30-year PFI, that's a private finance initiative contract for a new hospital, or outsources the provision of healthcare services to the private health company on a 25-year contract, these contracts can only be escaped from an enormous cost in compensation. Even modifying the contracts to take account of changing needs is extraordinarily expensive. When such long-term contracts are signed, the National Health Service is legally obliged to continue paying for them, no matter what the charging healthcare requirements of the community. Sorry, what the changing healthcare requirements of the community. These obligations build in inflexibility and inefficiency into the system. When the health system operates under a single umbrella, services can be modified with relative ease. But when the contracts with hedge funds, private equity groups and multinational healthcare companies have been signed, any modifications incur large financial costs. Now, for hospital closures, the Princess Regent University Hospital, which cost 118 million to construct, was built in South London, but under the terms of the PFI, that's the Private Financial Initiative contract. The amount repayable over the decades will be 2.5 billion, returning a handsome 70.6% profit to the PFI consortium. The extraordinary cost of paying off this PFI debt crippled the South London Healthcare Trust, forcing them to look for savings. The proposal they came up with was a plan to shut down the Accident and Emergency Department and the maternity ward at Lewisham Hospital, and to sell off the land and buildings in order to raise 17 million towards paying their PFI debts.
Well, they failed with Lewisham, didn't they? Lewisham actually did put up a good battle against it and prevailed. So,
yeah. Well, this plan would have left Lewisham with a population of 750,000 without an accident, emergency or maternity ward, and sparked large public protests and legal challenge against the decision to shut down most of the hospital and sell off the land. The legal challenge against the closure of Lewisham Accident and Emergency was successful, exactly what you just said, BJ. But this victory for people power was a short-lived one. The response of the Tory party, was to pass new legislation to allow the Health Secretary the power to shut down any National Health Service run hospital, no matter how efficiently the services is run. In just 40 days, as a result, next time a local health authority gets into financial difficulties as a result of their PFI debts, the Tories can simply shut down a load of local National Health Services run services in order to protect the profits of the rip-off PFI, Private Financial Initiative Consortia, no matter how efficient the National Health Services are or how strong the public opposition.
Yeah, it's not just the NHS that were built on PFIs. Other things like your sports places. I mean, we're up in Sheffield and that. Most of Sheffield international venues and Don Valley, especially that. All that were built on PFI.
Yeah.
We're still paying that off now.
Yeah, this is absolutely corporation takeover, which is all part of the New World Order moving and for complete domination.
We don't own it anymore. It's all being private. Sheffield International Venues own it now.
Yeah.
We've lost all that and we're still paying it off.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the debt still has to be paid. Yeah. It's crazy. Here's one undeniable example of lies from the Tory party manifesto of 2010. We will stop the forced closure of accident and emergency and maternity wards so that people have better access to local services and give mothers a real choice over where to have their baby, with National Health Service funding following their decisions. 2010 Conservative Party Manifesto, page 47. In 2012, the Tories attempt to force the closure of the A&E and maternity ward at Lewisham Hospital, but were defeated in the courts. In 2014, the Tories then passed a new legislation to make it much easier for the Health Secretary, Andrew Hartley, force the closure of NHS hospitals and services. And here's another example. In 2010, we will make patients choose meaningful by putting patients in charge of making decisions about their care, including control of their health records. 2010 Conservative Party Manifesto, page 47 yet again. In 2014, the Tories tabled legislation aimed at allowing private health corporations to buy access to people's private health records without their consent. After a huge public outcry against this plan, the Tories were forced to postpone their plan to sell off our medical data. However, within a week of them shelving this data, sharing plans, it was revealed that 47 million private medical records had already been sold off to the private insurance company. The Tories and the National Health Service eventually admitted that the records shouldn't have been sold off without anyone's consent. So I suppose that's all right then. So just because they admit it, it's okay. No,
it's totally fine now. If you admit it, you've done no wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there should be action taken against these people when they're doing things against the set law.
Yeah, but if you admit it, that's all right. It's forgiveness.
Yeah. So I'll go and rob a bank and admit it. Will I get off with it? Privatisation and profits, socialising the losses. Yeah, they reap the profits, but we have to bear the debts. Yeah. The most recent example of privatising the profits and socialising the losses can be seen in the botched eye operations carried out at the National Health Service's Musgrove Park Hospital in Taunton by the private sector contractor Vanguard Health. 30 of the 60 operations carried out by the private company led to complications, including complete blindness in one case. After just 4 days, the National Health Services Hospital terminated the contract with Vanguard. But it seems that the National Health Service Hospital, which will be held liable for compensations to the victims of these botched eye operations carried out on the National Health Services premises by a private company, another example of the taxpayer having to pay out for the failings of private health companies, can be in the case of the Lister Surgery Centre in Stevenage, which was run by the private company Clinic Centre, until the contract was terminated early in 2013 due to poor standards of care. In order to terminate the contract, the taxpayer had to fork out 53 million in compensations to Clinic Centre.
Yeah, sorry, that's roughly what we give to Europe each day, is it not? 53 mil?
No, Well, it actually works out per household per year is £6,000 per household. But these figures were back from 2013, PJ. For us to be in the EU, back in, this is 2013 figures, 170 billion a year. So what it is now, crikey only knows.
I'm just having a look now. Last time I knew it were in 50s, so I'm just trying to find a recent
Yeah.
on how much it is.
While you hunt for that, I'll go on to the next article and you can burst in when you found it, mate.
Right, no worries, will do.
This article is from the Express, and it is, we are the only party that can save the NHS, declares United Kingdom's Independent Party's Nigel Farage. And this is an article, today's article. By all means, laud and applaud it. If you are Labour, claim it as yours. Cite Bevan. Throw in warm and fuzzy words and ensure your audience has a fine scattering of healthcare workers. Save our hospital. Campaigners for the fearful and fearmongers who will cry privatisation at any mention of reform. Cover up the fact that the NHS is impinging along under the weight of an estimated £1 billion deficit this year alone. Well, that deficit would be easily wiped clear, would it not, if we weren't in the EU? With 3/4 of hospitals facing the prospect of being in the red by the end of 2014, without an urgent government bailout. Not to mention the financial problems obviously directly lead to poor performance, erroneous waiting times and low staffing levels that impact on patient safety. Whoops, sorry, I've gone miles too far, forgive me. Certainly don't mention the fact that the French-owned company Steria, with various subsidies in the guise of a range of acronyms, already control 100 billion of the National Health Service spending, including the movement of medical records, patient registration, screening programs such as cervical and breast screening, payments and primary care contracts. Essentially, huge swathes of the NHS already have been privatised. That ship has sailed. The British healthcare and current political football, and sadly is receiving the same treatment afforded to immigration for decades. That was a statement from Nigel Farage, of the UKIP leader. The British healthcare, especially to the Labour Party, is the current political football, and sadly is receiving the same treatment afforded to immigration for decades. Do not criticise it, do not propose radical change, and brush the big structural issues under that lumpy, bumpy carpet. The problem with this approach, of course, is that problems are allowed to go unchecked and the situation is allowed to fester because nobody is brave enough to talk about the issues. The rare whistleblowers who do are ruthlessly hounded out, threatened and silenced. It seems like in many sectors that, does it not? Yeah. This is David Cameron standing in front of a big display, Together for a Stronger National Health Service. He makes you laugh. Well, it isn't funny. Not funny at all. The Labour Party, realising they are losing votes to United Kingdom Independence Party at an increasingly alarming pace, are resorting to an American-style attack tactic, no doubt conjured up by their new US strategist David Axelrod. They lash out and try to scare voters away by shouting "privatisation" at the top of their voices. That is why 2 days ago The Guardian trawled up an answer to a question I gave back in 2012 as part of a wider debate about the future of the National Health Service. Instead of focusing on the excellent conference speech given by Louise Bourse in Doncaster this year, where she laid out the party's health policy, they cropped a few lines from the discussion over 2 years ago and told their readers that UKIP wanted to privatise the NHS, just like immigration. It is becoming increasingly impossible to even raise the NHS as a topic for close examination. The debate is always shut down.
Right, well, just want to step in there, Paul. I managed to find something. It's not recent as in today's recent stuff, and I've actually looked on EU website, and it only goes as far as 2013, which I thought were a bit strange.
Yeah.
But I'll show you what I have got, which is coming up on your screen right about now. Is our EU membership fee £55 million? During the LPC leaders' debate, UKIP leader Nigel Farage claimed the UKIP membership fee of the EU is £55 million a day. That's the equivalent of about 20 billion in total per year. I'll make this article quick, not to take too much of your time, Blackhole, but it said it's reasonable to describe 55 million as our membership fee, but it ignores the fact that we get money back as well. So the gross, not net, UKIP have used these figures in the past as part of their reports, analysing how much the EU costs Britain. 20 billion is roughly what the UK government and households paid to EU institutions in 2012. These include payments to the central EU budget, as well as the customs duties and agricultural levies. So I just want to bring you down to this chart as well here. As you can see, over since 1973, it's starting to increase. There you go. Gross contributions to rebate and public sector receipts from the EU budget. So just one look at that chart is all you need to see, really, and that line going up. So there you go, Paul. I'll pass it back over to you. I just want to put in there just to pass you that.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. Thank you. Right. Could this be because the National Health Service that was run by the Labour Party is in a mess? And actually the only way to fix it would be to abandon the core principles that underpinned its foundations as free at the point of service, afforded and owned by the taxpayers and run by and for the people. We are an ageing society, we are a burgeoning society, we are a society with many different languages, living in an era of medical innovation, new pharmaceuticals and technologies to tackle a wider array of recognised conditions. It is becoming almost an impossibility to keep pace with the rate of change, and afford will be leading medical care out of the public purse. Well, I still can't see how we can't afford it when, as you say, all we've got to do is stop going to all these wars which are unnecessary and paying out for them, and come out of the EU and build up our own industry and everything properly again, rather than being a service nation. Which Margaret Thatcher wanted us to be. The trouble is, with being a service nation, if there's no work, there's nothing to service. We are in an age, oh sorry, I just read that, but we are not allowed to talk about it. Well, I'm sorry, I will talk about it, and nobody's going to stop me talking about it. UKIP's policy is simple. We firmly believe that the National Health Service care should be free at the point of access. That's a non-negotiable. We're the only party opposed to TTIP. That's the Transatlantic Trade and Investment. Sorry, forgive me. Partnership. That's the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. Bit of a tongue twangler, that one, isn't it? No. Oh, it says it there, actually. Which would allow American corporates to win contracts in the NHS and potentially sue the government if changes of policy cut their profits. Labour and the Tories both support it. Whoa. We want everyone coming to Britain to live and work or to visit to have private medical insurance as a condition of entry. Meaning if they seek treatment while they are here, it will be paid for them and not the British taxpayer, saving the NHS approximately $2 billion a year. We want to scrap hospital parking charges, using 200 million of those £200 million of those savings to ensure that if you are sick or visiting a sick friend or relative, you will not have the added stress of paying increasingly eye-watering fees for parking the car. Well, that made sense to me. But why can't these politicians see it makes even more sense? Stop going to these ridiculous wars. Just protect our own borders, our own country's safe. So that is the only forces money we need to pay out for and get out of the EU. All it's done is cost us loads and loads of money. We've not benefited from it because we have gradually gone downhill more and more since we've been in it since 1975. Anyway, my next article. A third of NHS contracts awarded to private firms, and this was 10th December 2014. So it was only a couple of months ago. Well, sorry, 4 months ago, 5 months ago. A third of the National Health Service contracts in England have been awarded to private sector providers since the service was reorganised in 2013, figures suggest. The information comes from the Freedom of Information request made by the British Medical Journal. Of 3,494 contracts awarded by the 182 clinical commissioning groups in England between April 2013 and August 2014, 33% went to the private sector. Wow, that's over a third. The government says the data is misleading. It's unclear how much of the contracts are worth because the CCGS would not disclose this information, citing commercial sensitivities. As is commercial sensitivities, it's taxpayers' money that's going, so we should have a right to know, don't you think, PJ?
Well,
Department of
yeah, definitely, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are they on about? Commercial sensitivities. Are they paying out what they shouldn't be paying out to these corporations, and it's all backhanders? I'm not saying it is, but it sounds. Why is there commercial sensitivities when it's our money that's being paid out? We should know, and we should have the right to know. A Department of Health spokesman said, official National Health Services accounts show that the use of the private sector amounts to only 6 pence in every pound the National Health Service spends, slowing the rate of increase to just 1 penny since May 2010. Charities, social enterprises and other providers of healthcare play an important role in the National Health Service, as they have done for many years. Yeah, now it's a slow creep. The investigation looked at a different type of contract to provide National Health Service clinical services, including those awarded to a single provider without an open tender. Those awarded via a competitive tendering process, and those awarded to multiple providers under any qualified provider. A government policy that opened up a wide range of community-based National Health Services to different providers from outside the National Health Service. Private sector providers were most successful at winning contracts awarded via competitive tender. 80 compared with 59 won by the National Health Service providers. The total value of all the contracts investigated was £10 billion. Around £8.5 billion worth of contracts went to the National Health Service providers. £690 million to voluntary and social enterprise providers, and £490 million to the private sector, 5% of the total. It is crazy how the people in the services are not allowed to know where their money is going because of corporate sensitivities. They should be coming second in the equation here. Anyway, the next article is the Express, and this is one about revealed how Britain is 170 billion worse off in European Union. This is the 2013 newspaper. This is the question you came out with earlier, PJ.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you already had an article with the attention on it, and you sent me looking, and you already had it all along.
Yeah, you read my mind, my friend. The huge figure equates to about 11% of national output and more than £6,000 for every household. The figures are based on a report published last year by Professor Tim Condon. Well, actually, so that this was actually based on 2012 figures, really, then, but the actual report came out in 2013. So, by Professor Tim Condon. When he estimated the bill was at least 160 billion, he updated his findings, which provide more fuel for the Daily Express crusade for Britain to leave the EU. Economist Professor Condon is economics spokesman for the UK Independence Party, whose annual conference starts today in London. Well, that's back in 2014. He believes 2013, going back to the Middle Ages. He believes the biggest single cost comes from 120,000 pages of e-law. 120,000 pages of EU law. And there's more to come. He said, after a decade outside the EU, Britain would be a much prosperous nation, as well as having the opportunity to restore its traditional constitutional and legal arrangements. Professor Condon estimates that direct expenses like payments to the EU budget cost the average British household some £750 a year, rising towards £1,000 if Turkey and new Balkan countries join the EU and need support. It also includes of trade distortions arising from the common agricultural policy and general protectionism, as well as jobs that may have been lost to some 100,000 UK-born people thanks to massive migration from Eastern Europe. Waste, fraud and corruption and unforeseen commitments such as the cost of health and benefits, tourism also feature. But he claims the biggest single cost comes from 120,000 pages of EU law, including job-reducing employment regulations. Job-reducing employment regulations, that's what the EU is giving us. Reducing our jobs, regulating to reduce our jobs. Isn't that great? Green energy policies and financial regulations. It just blows my brain. My next article is from the Telegraph, but this is today's article again. Voters could get early, in out, shake it all about, do the okey-cokey referendum. David Cameron says as general election campaign gets underway. Prime Minister risks Tory split by stating that the Eurosceptic Tory cabinet ministers would have to toe the government line and campaign to stay within the reformed EU. Voters could get an early vote on Britain's membership of the European Union. David Cameron has said as the Conservatives launched an unprecedented attack on Labour's plans for government. Mr Cameron said that he would like to bring forward the in-out, shake it all about EU referendum. Sorry, the shake it all about isn't there. I'm referring to doing the okey-cokey, which David Cameron seems to love to do, in an apparent bid to win round support among Tory voters who are tempted to vote for the UK Independence Party in May. The Prime Minister also risked a Tory split by stating that Eurosceptic Tory cabinet ministers would have to toe the government line and campaign to stay within a reformed EU. The news came as the main parties formally start their general election campaign on what is promising to be a dramatic day in Westminster politics. Ed Miliband, the Labour leader, will kickstart his campaign in Manchester on Monday by promising that his party will have face-to-face conversations with 4 million voters between now and polling day. So up in Manchester this coming Monday. Go and question him, people. Right, my next article. Now, this is actually a video, and this is David Cameron on the Britain and Europe, and it's him telling us that he's going to give us an in-out vote. So here we go. Let's see. Hope it rolls, PJ. Here we go.
A treaty change. But I agree too with what President Barroso and others have said. At some stage in the next few years, the EU will need to agree on treaty change to make the changes needed for the long-term future of the euro, and to entrench the diverse, competitive, democratically accountable Europe that we seek. Now, I believe the best way to do this will be in a new treaty. So today I add my voice to those who are already calling for this. Now, my strong preference is to enact these changes for the entire European Union, not just for Britain. But if there is no appetite for a new treaty for us, and if there is no appetite for a new treaty for us, or for us all, then of course Britain would be ready to address the changes we need in a negotiation with our European partners. So the next Conservative manifesto in 2015 will ask for a mandate from the British people for a Conservative government to negotiate a new settlement with our European partners in the next Parliament. It will be a relationship with the single market at its heart. And when we have negotiated that new settlement, we will give the British people a referendum with a very simple in or out choice: to stay in the European Union on these new terms or to come out altogether. It will be an in-out referendum. Legislation will be drafted before the next election, and if a Conservative government is elected, We will introduce the enabling legislation immediately and pass it by the end of that year. And we will complete this negotiation and hold this referendum within the first half of the next Parliament. It is time for the British people to have their say. It is time for us to settle this question about Britain and Europe. I say to the British people, this will be...
Well, we should have had it in the last 5 years. You said we could have it before the last elections, did he not?
But
So,
Blackhole, we're not in the EU.
no, you're dead right. We are in the
So what he's doing is he's going off the brainwashing people who think that we are, and he's trying to say, well, what we'll do is offer you a referendum if you get us in, and then you can decide whether you want to be in or out. Bearing in mind that we're not already actually in it, right? Rightfully speaking, we're not actually already in it. So just as is it worth it Scottish referendum where it was something like 45% to 55, yeah, something like that, yeah. Well, basically, this referendum that he's proposing to give, what that'll do is if most majorities decide to stay in it, then that'll be the
confirmation,
that'll be it, yeah. So then we will be in it. We're not actually in it. So what's he going on about in and out, in and out? We're not even in it.
Yeah, well, let me explain to all the viewers that may be shouting, but we're in the EU, but we're in the EU. No, we are not in the EU, people. Back in 1975, and I remember this because it was my first ever able time to vote, and we had a referendum. And the referendum was to join the EEC, which was the European Economic Community, and they were stating it was for trade only. But then, in 1993, they reframed it all. They reframed it to the EU. But they just did not name change it. They reframed the conditions. But they did not ask the people with a new referendum. So therefore, they have given away England's power to a foreign entity without the people's permission, which is against our constitution. So therefore, all what has happened, every law that's been passed by the EU is null and void. And we are still in the common market, not the EU. So please pass it to your friends. We are not in the EU, and we don't really need to vote whether we're in out or out.
It's dangerous to even ask for a referendum. We don't need a referendum because we're not in it.
No, exactly. And all these treasonous politicians that have been pushing this forward, that we're in the EU, have been lying out their backsides. Either they are absolutely dumb or they're absolutely lying. Either way, they're not good enough. So I really believe we ought to have a direct democracy. A direct democracy is where you go along to your own councils, have a vote, and that all gets passed to a centre point, and then the vote all over the country goes in, counted, and it is more direct and answerable to the people. Because the politicians, they are not respecting the wishes of their constituents whatsoever. Every election I've asked the politicians that have come knocking on my door about the EU, and they change the subject. They don't want to talk about it because they know they're shamming. Anyway, but yeah, you're absolutely right, PJ. We are not in the EU. We are still in the common market.
How weren't even born when, you know, back when the ECC was set up, Paul, to even see it and witness it myself, right? And I was young in '93 when it went to EU, right? But from what I've learned and researched and found out, I know that that's the case, and we're not in it. We don't need no referendum. We need him out because he shouldn't even be in. So you can start by changing tabs, because that's the next nearest thing we can do to get him out of his minds. And we need to stop listening to his rubbish. We don't need his rubbish. We don't need any of his party members' rubbish, or the junta. We don't need none of their rubbish. We just need a proper democracy, a direct democracy, as you said, Blackhole. So.
Yeah. So we are still in the EEC, which is the European Economic Community, and that was pushed and pushed and pushed. It's for trade only. It's for trade only. So why are we being bombarded with their laws, trying to overlap and overlay our own law in this country? As, how many was it? 230,000 EU laws, was it not? I read out
120,000. Did you say?
Yeah, and there is many more to come, I can assure you.
Yeah,
and they're getting more and more stringent. And I will prove that it's the EEC. Next, I'll show you this. This is history learning site. Yeah. The 1975 referendum, and I can speak with authority on this because I was there, I voted in it, and I absolutely voted no because I knew what was happening even back then. Referendum on the EEC membership. Not the EU membership, the EEC, the European Economic Community. Yeah? Look here, the common market, for trade only, the common market. Not all these laws and stringent acts against us. They are forcing tyranny down our throat, and we should not accept it. That comes to the end of my articles, PJ.
Do you want to just scroll down, because I want to see what it says under England?
Oh, certainly, yes, certainly, yeah.
Well, you've got it up, just for...
Yeah. These are the voting results. Now, as you can see, the yes was more or less double the no's. Well, it is over double the no's. But that was on the basis that people were being told it's the EEC, and it was for trade, and it was for trade only.
What's the spoiled papers there, Paul? The spoiled papers?
Spoiled papers, 42,000, which is minuscule, really, overall. You know, I mean, 42,000 on that just makes that, what, 7,000 odd, don't it?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's still over double. But that was on the proviso that it was for trade only. Yeah, the Economic Union, the EEC, the European Economic Union, for trade only in the common market. So people, don't keep listening to these people that say you're in the EU, because you are not in the EU. What they've done is illegal. They have committed treason. No two ways about it. It's like a light switch. There's on and off. And if you switch it on, the light comes on.
But what I'm saying, though, is even though we've just proved that we're not actually in it, right? Here we've got David Cameron admitting that we're in it. So even though we're not, and he's admitting to it that we are, he's either something not right with him, or he's admitted to treason.
Yeah.
Or at least being a part of it, because it was done back in, Ted Heath's time.
He's lying, or he just don't know. He's lying, or he just don't know. And I think I tend to take the first one out of that too. And he's committed treason. They've all committed treason. Right back from the days of Heath, they committed treason. Yeah. Every one of them.
And what this referendum, what he's trying to dish out, that's to basically, put it back onto us, so it takes responsibility off of them, really. It sort of blames us for it.
Yeah.
So we're not in it. We don't need referendum. Don't get involved in it.
We was
to do the same.
Back in 1975, we was a very strong industrial country. and we were changed over into a surface country. And as I said, if things are not going too well, where do you work if there's nothing to surface?
Mm. Well,
But yeah,
is
yeah.
that
So
all? Right, Paul. I'll just bring you all to a peace of mind before we finish off. It's a short video.
thank you.
Can you see that? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got him. Thank you, PJ.
Hey, you! Yes, you! You lying in bed scrolling through your phone, and you watching this secretly at the back of your lecture.
Tut, tut.
And you just trying to pass the time whilst your curly fries crisp in the oven. You've come to the right place, and I'm about to share some serious knowledge! We live in a democratic society, which means we do a lot of voting. We vote on who we think's the best singer, on which talent we'd like to see before we run the Queen, which celebrity we'd like to see in a kangaroo's tail. But now we're being called upon to vote something much bigger! Bigger than Hacking Federal, bigger than the world's largest speaker, and this, and this, and this! We're being called to vote on the future of this country in this general election! Still don't get what you're voting for? Okay. Open your brains! So, there are two houses, the House of Commons and the House of Lords. House of Commons has 650 seats. Every 4 to 5 years, we kick everyone off their seats. Each seat belongs to a constituency. This means an area of the country. So, 650 seats, 650 constituencies in the country. Each constituency elects one MP who gets a seat in the House of Commons. All of the people in the House of Commons get to propose and consider laws, ask questions and study government policies. The party with the majority of seats forms the government, and the leader of the party in power becomes our Prime Minister. Now, back to the House of Lords. The House of Lords seats are not based on voting, they get appointed by the Queen.
Woo!
And they are there to check the work of the government. Now for some stats.
In the last election, almost 200 of the seats were filled by a politician with a majority of less than 10%. If more students had voted, they could have swung the results of these 200 seats. And swinging the results of those 200 seats could have changed who had the majority. And changing the majority would have changed the government, which could have changed the Prime Minister.
So, basically, students hold the key. They're the game changers. They're the blue to Heisenberg's meth, the Lord Walder to the Red Wedding, the sacrifice Lily Potter made for Harry's survival, and the Immaculate Conception of the Virgin Mary! But wait! We have a problem! Flashback to 2010!
76% of the over 65 pull themselves away from their games of bowls, bingo and daytime TV to vote. But only 44% of 16 to 25-year-olds did the same.
44%! That's some serious glass half-empty bull! What are you doing, you 16 to 25 f***ers? Are you f***ing kidding me? It's like ordering a pizza and eating less than half! Paying extortionate amounts for a cocktail in a trendy old new bar, then drinking less than 50%! Going on the whole of a lifetime for 10 days! And coming home after 4.5! Come on, people! We have a dream! I'm starting with the man in the mirror and I'm asking him to change his ways! We want to be the generation that got themselves a better deal, so register to vote today!
There you go, guys. That's all I've got. Do join us again tomorrow, hopefully, for some more Flux news. We will have Blackhole with us, and he'll be bringing the latest information on Melanie's show, and also reporting from the visual tomorrow. And if you are around in that area, do get there. You can find all information on the axiomcape.org website. So until tomorrow, do take care. And anything else to say, Blackhole, before we go?
Just remember to love everybody.
Nice. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. Take care for now.